Greetings again everyone. Voigtländer might not be the most talked about name in optics nowadays, but the fact remains that they produce some of the best manual focus lenses in existence, particularly their premium APO-Lanthar line, so I'm really pleased to be putting their 110mm f2.5 Macro APO-Lanthar lens through its paces here today. At $1,000 or just over £900 here in the UK, it's a pricey option, but if the optics are up to scratch, then most serious macro photographers would probably be happy to spend that much, especially as being limited to manual focus isn't such an issue with macro work. You're often manually focusing up close anyway. But this lens has a slightly longer reach and slightly brighter aperture than your typical 100mm macro lens, so that could make it even more useful for portrait photography. In fact, this is an excellent portrait and subject lens, although admittedly I did find focusing manually a little more tricky at normal distances. This one is designed for Sony E-mount cameras, full frame or APS-C, and I'd like to thank Voigtlander's UK distributor for loaning me this lens for testing for a few weeks, although as usual this is a totally independent review. This lens is quite portly, as you can see, and at 770 grams or nearly 2 pounds, it's rather heavy, being made of metal with a metallic lens mount, but no weather sealing, a curious omission. As you can see, although this is a manual focus lens, there are electronic connections there for EXIF information and so that the camera can detect when you move the focus ring and automatically go into focus peaking mode. Then comes an aperture ring, which turns with slightly gentle clicks at each third of an f-stop. This works completely manually, although your camera will recognize what aperture setting you're at. The iris mechanism has 10 straight blades to it. Next comes the metallic focus ring. This thing is crazy. It turns well over 360 degrees for huge precision and extends really far out. It takes quite a lot of turning really to go from shooting macro to shooting at normal distances. I found that slightly annoying sometimes. Turn, turn, turn. But it turns so smoothly and precisely, and it's very well damped. As you can see here, the lens struggles quite a bit with focus breathing. That's pretty normal though for a macro lens. The lens's front filter size is 58mm, although it comes with a metallic metal hood which has its own 67mm filter thread, and my copy of the lens came with a 67mm lens cap. It does not feature image stabilization, although it will work fine with your camera's in-body stabilization if it has it. Overall, the build quality is gorgeous here, although that focus ring can be a bit of a chore to keep turning. Okay, let's take a look at image quality. We'll start by testing it on a full frame camera, my 42MP Sony a7R III, and in-camera corrections are turned on. At f2.5, the image is unbelievably razor sharp in the middle with excellent contrast, and the corners just a tiny bit softer but still absolutely excellent. Stop down to f4 and the quality becomes perfect in the corners, although the difference is so tiny you might not even see it through YouTube. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, where just a tiny edge of softness becomes visible due to diffraction. f16 and f22 are noticeably softer for the same reason. Still, it's 10 out of 10 for image quality here, especially considering the high demands of a 42MP sensor. Alright, let's test it on APS-C now by attaching it to my little Sony a5100 with its 24MP cropped sensor. The image continues to look incredible in the middle from f2.5. The corners are just a touch softer with a hint of ghosting on contrasting edges. f4 looks about the same but stopped down to f5.6 and that contrast has sharpened right up. It stays this sharp down to f11 and as you'd expect, f16 and beyond looks softer due to diffraction. So, I was a little surprised by the slightly softer corners on APS-C, but that kind of thing can occasionally happen. Remember, a 24MP APS-C sensor is actually higher density than 42MP on full frame. Okay, let's turn off in-camera corrections and take a look at distortion and vignetting on full frame. The lens projects just a hint of pincushion distortion here, but at f2.5 the corners are rather dark. At f4 or f5.6 they brighten up quite nicely though. Now then, close-up image quality, and this is vital for a macro lens. At f2.5 there's a lot of sharpness, but contrast seems to be down a little. f4 looks about the same, but f5.6 sees excellent contrast emerging. f8 looks about the same. f11 is a touch softer due to diffraction, and f16 and f22 get really soft. So, plenty of sharpness here in the normal aperture range, but stop down the aperture a little for the best contrast. Let's see how the lens works against bright lights now. It's good news, even at f2.5 only very minimal flaring can be seen here, and no real loss in contrast. Okay, let's take a look at the quality of this lens's bokeh. It's soft, but also rather distinctive in that out-of-focus highlights do have some real weight to them, but no outlining, leading to quite bold-looking backgrounds. Whether that is your kind of thing is of course up to you. And finally, longitudinal chromatic aberration. This lens carries the coveted APO designation, or apochromatic, indicating that this kind of colour fringing should be properly corrected, and it certainly is. As you can see, no longitudinal chromatic aberration is visible here. Overall, the Voigtländer 110mm f2.5 APO-Lanthar is an extremely high quality apochromatic macro lens, which is a little better for portrait shooting than other 100mm macro lenses on the market, if you like its bokeh, that is. Its giant turning extending focus ring is also a little quirky and perhaps not to everyone's taste, but its sharpness is absolutely ridiculous. It's one of the sharpest lenses I've tested. If you're happy with focusing manually, then this thing comes highly recommended. Okay, here comes the Patreon bit. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters for helping me to keep this channel going with your support, and I love putting together extra bonus content for supporters over on my page. Check it out in the description below, and ciao for now.